Hey everyone. Um, Hope everyone's doing well. I am going to be doing this a little different this time because it's going to be me telling my story. So if you guys leave pretty much comments or you guys leave things in the chat, I will, get back to it once I'm done. And if you're not aware, or you're not a content creator, or you're just, not on YouTube, you are able to come back and look at the chat. So just to give you guys an FYI, if, you just aren't on the platform. And the majority of you guys that follow my page or, follow me in general, aren't, followers of a lot of these platforms. So I get it. And well, see, here's the thing. I have to do this one a little different simply because I basically just need to tell this side of my story. And if I tell this part of, there's a lot of trauma involved, a lot of addictions that I have gone through. So I figure with this segment, using it as a live, with this segment, I want to pretty much give you guys a sense of everything that I have had to pretty much unravel in my lifetime. Because the thing of it is that when you go through multiple things in your life and your outcome and your alternative later on in life as an adult, if you make it that far, the majority of people with, complex PTSD don't make it that far because, you have the mental health system that wants to make it worse and wants to make you sicker than you actually are, wants to give you a diagnosis and shove pills down your throat and give you therapy that doesn't work. For some individuals, it does work, but for the majority, there's continuous relapse. For the majority, there's no rock bottom when it comes to addiction. There's no end to self-inflicting wounds. And for those of you who don't realize, self-harm comes in all different forms. It doesn't just have to be, to the skin. It doesn't have to be, burning. It doesn't have to be cutting. It doesn't have to be, it can also be emotional. So an example I can give you guys is if you have a toxic family, if you have an abusive parent, even though you're an adult, it's still considered abuse because they never took accountability for their actions. They never took accountability for how they treated you or, them needing you to fulfill their happiness or fulfill their lives. It's still considered abuse because that parent-child relationship doesn't go away. For a lot of parents, they don't seem to think that when you become an adult, you're now their friend. You're now, someone they get to treat more like shit because you're an adult. I get to tell you what to say, but at the same time, I'm not your parent. That dynamic never goes away. And then people often wonder why that gets passed down when those children who are abused that have children and they repeat the same cycle because either they don't know any better or two, they don't know they're being abused. And, there's just a lot of reasons why a lot of abuse and trauma gets passed down from generation to generation. There's a lot of reasons. It's not just, one particular pinpoint, one particular reason, one particular finger that you need to point at. Do you see what I'm saying? So a lot of people just seem to think that it's one size fits all, and it's not. So I want to give each segment a story, so that's why I wanted to do these lives, particularly for this series. And once I tell this segment, and once I start breaking down, you know, what impact each trauma had, what different things that I went through that, you know, that basically manifested into everything else, in basically a snowball effect, and then eventually a downward spiral from a domino effect of constant trauma. So I'm trying to figure out, you know, how many different things I would have to unravel, because, you know, a lot of people don't know, but the majority of you guys do, is that, you know, I struggled with an eating disorder. I struggled with drugs and alcohol very early in life. And a lot of these things started when I was a kid. And, you know, being taught by my family to just escape, being taught by my family to just, you know, just run from your feelings, don't feel at all. But then when, you know, your addiction or your mental state, or, you know, it's showing, you know what I mean? Like I could no longer hide that, you know, I was self-harming. I could no longer hide that I was hurting myself. And a lot of what happens is that it turns into chaos, and then you're to blame for what you're doing to hurting yourself, and then there's no accountability on that aspect as well. So a lot of you guys know, and a lot of you guys don't know. So before I get started, I want to give a trigger warning. And even though it's in the description, a lot of people just surpassed the description portion of YouTube. And a lot of people just don't mean to. It's just, you know, everybody wants to get to the nitty gritty and get to the video. But before I, you know, go any further and get into it and go into a deeper dive, you know, it's going to be a lot. It's going to be intense. If you have dealt with self-harm, if you have dealt with any type of sexual, physical, emotional abuse, if you've ever dealt with neglect, if you've ever dealt with, you know, incest, if you've ever dealt with any form of what I'm basically going to be pinpointing in my story and in this video, is that, you know, if you need to come back to it, I would appreciate it if you did that. If this is something that's going to be too hard for you and you need to come back and, you know, be in a better state, that's fine. Or if this is something that you just can't watch, I get it. I know a lot of other content creators that get triggered easily, and they have to wait a bit to do a video that they know is going to bring them back to certain memories. So it can be therapeutic, but it also can be triggering at the same time. So there's, you know, that double-edged sword concept. So just wanted to give that fair warning before I go any further. So with that being said, my self-harm started very, very young, at a very young age. And it was right after the first sexual assault that I had to deal with. And I was 7 years old. And me being so young, and at a young age, I knew that I didn't have a voice. You know, me being multi-disabled, I didn't speak until I was 3 years old. But I knew that growing up in the household that I did, I knew that I didn't have a voice. I knew that no matter what I said, nothing mattered. No matter what I said, I was the butt of the joke. No matter what I said, um, I was the stupid one. I was slow. I was, worthless. That was ingrained in my head as to how my family wanted me to perceive myself, because that's how they saw themselves. So I knew even at a young age that a lot of people, especially adults, when it comes to adults, when they start attacking you and they start, belittling you and telling you all these names and they want to hurt you, it's because not only do they feel that way about themselves because that's how they were brought up, but they're hurting as well. So I never took that part of the abuse, that part of the trauma to heart, because I knew that it wasn't about me. I knew it was them. So that part of the trauma, I didn't take in because I was already dealing with enough as it is. So I feel like even at a young age, my brain knew how to protect itself, regardless of, my environment, my household, having to hide it, having to basically live a double life. And after the first sexual assault, I did go to family members to say that I was being, raped. I was being, like, I literally said in full detail, and all that was thrown back at me was, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You're just a stupid little girl. Like, you have no idea what the hell you're talking about. That didn't happen to you. Like, these same comments were reiterated 3 different times with the same person. And then I went to like 3 other adults, and it's like nobody cared, It's like, oh, just ignore it and it'll go away kind of type thing. And at at 7 years old, you don't understand it. You're trying to seek help from people that are supposedly supposed to care about you, especially at parents. And nothing happens. So I knew from then on that I couldn't go to them. It's like if I couldn't go to somebody, especially an adult, if I couldn't go to somebody with something so horrible as being raped, being sexually assaulted, being violated, and you lose your innocence. I felt like I died that day. And the first thing that's out of their mouth is, you don't know what you're talking about, or you don't know what you're saying, or that didn't happen. Like, from then on, I knew that, okay, so no matter what happens to me, I just have to sit there and take it. That's kind of how I perceived it as a kid. What else was I supposed to do? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, that's kind of how I perceived what was happening. And I didn't know, like, I felt like I needed to release it in some way. And even though I had found, art at an early age, I had found it at like 6 years old. I knew that I could, paint. I knew that I could draw. I knew that, I could sing. I could I had a lot of gifts and talents, but at the same time, like, this intensity of pain and hurt, and I could not, I needed something different to release the pain. And I couldn't figure it out for the life of me. I knew about self-harm from a friend of mine in elementary school. And she was kind of going through similar abuse, and I can't really, specify, but because it's not my story to tell, you guys know how I feel about that. But I feel like, she was trying to survive as well. And she was smoking at a young age, and I knew that was something that I couldn't touch. Um, and then she was also self-harming. So the first time I witnessed her do it, I didn't think that that would help. I saw it and I just cringed, because it's like, how are you able to do that and not feel pain? And cutting was like the biggest thing for me, and I didn't realize how addicting it was. I didn't see it, being a kid and not understanding the psychological aspect of it as to why it's so addicting and why it's such a release and why it's so dangerous. Again, we didn't know anything about like the Ehlers-Danlos. We didn't know anything about the Kaplan-Meier. We didn't know pretty much anything. We didn't even know that I was losing my vision and hearing at the time. I was like, they were looking at the wrong thing when it came to my doctors and specialists. They just were looking at the wrong areas of the body when it was the complete opposite of what they were looking at. So again, like, we didn't know anything about, we just knew that I couldn't see, well, I knew I couldn't see at night. I knew that I needed hearing aids. I knew that, I was always in pain, but we didn't know that it was the others. Like, a lot of things just didn't come up. And we didn't have like the modern technology that we had back then. Like, this was mid to late 90s, and everything, like, doctors were reading things out of a book, like literally reading medical rare illnesses in a book. Nowadays, you just, type in Google, or you type in whatever search engine medical professionals use. They don't use Google. They use something different, obviously. But like, I didn't get how deep in I would be. Like, I didn't get how bad it could get until I was like in my teens. But the very first thing that I would utilize is a straight razor. And for those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, a straight razor it's like a single blade, and it's like a long square blade, and it's what men used back in the day to shave. It's extremely sharp. It's extremely dangerous if, given in the wrong hands. And a lot of the times, like, kids had to watch out for that in their Halloween candy, unfortunately, back in the day. And when I first used that, because we didn't have anything else. Back then, we didn't have the disposable razors yet. And I don't even remember what year my family started buying those, but we didn't have those yet. The big disposable razors, because before then there was no shake intuition. There wasn't women didn't have we didn't have our own razors until, I want to say, like the late 90s or early 2000s. We didn't have like specified for ourselves for a long time. It took them a while to give us our own stuff. But you know, me utilizing that for the first time, I kind of knew that I was in trouble because, you know, seeing the scars afterwards and for me, I had to, and I know that I can't say a lot of detail because it's YouTube, but I had to feel it. And I don't know if it's because I'm blind. I don't know if it's because I feel more, it's because I'm deafblind. I believe that I have to sense things through touch, and it could be anything. And I mean, like anything across the board. Like for me, it feels better for me if it's by touch. And I do believe that that's because I'm deafblind, and me seeing that, and you are able to touch it afterwards because it's raised. You know, the cut is raised, it turns into a scab, and then it turns into a scar, depending on how deep your wound is, and it really truly depends on how bad you're hurting that day. And at the time, you know, I was 7 years old, so I didn't understand that why I didn't feel it. Like, how is it possible that I didn't feel this blade through my skin? How is that possible? But later on, you know, being in treatment and stuff like that later on in life, I realized that the emotional pain is so bad that it's like your brain shuts off those receptors, and your brain is capable of doing that. For people who self-harm, or for people that are addicted to anything, your brain has a way of shutting off those receptors because your brain is protecting you. Now, I'm not saying that that's a good thing, because it's not. But if you have complex PTSD, or if you have gone through some type of trauma, you don't even have to have PTSD. If you have some type of trauma, the end result is your brain is going to shift itself, and it's going to find ways for you to protect yourself, because it can't deal, you as an individual, your soul cannot deal with what has happened, and it doesn't forget. And because CPTSD is a neurological disorder, and people forget that also, that trauma is neurological. It's not a mental illness. So it's not, for some reason, people think that, you know, complex PTSD and trauma are mental illness. It's not in the same category as bipolar, as schizophrenia, as being addicted to something. It's not in the same category. It is the cause as to why people are depressed. It's the cause as to why people are anxious. It is the cause. It's not the actual, it's not a symptom. It's the cause. But people don't want to, you know, have sympathy anymore. People don't want to have compassion. People don't want to think anymore. Everyone's lazy. And it annoys the hell out of me. So that progressed even further after I was 9, because that's when the sex trafficking started, unfortunately. And again, I'm not going to go into too much detail. If you guys, you know, want more info and in-depth info on that, I do have several videos that I will link after this. Once this is done, I can, you know, set it up to link it on my end card. But, you know, it just got worse over time, because I went back and forth between the eating disorder, because that started first. You know, since the eating disorder started when I was young, and I will get into another video about that. But that started young, And then it switched from that to the self-harm, and then it went back and forth. So like if people told me I needed to eat, then that's when the bulimia would manifest, and then I would switch to the self-harm, and it would just be a back and forth thing. But when I was younger, the main reason for me self-harming was to punish myself. And a lot of people don't understand this aspect as well, because there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of guilt involved when it comes to self-harm, just like drugs and alcohol. So if you've ever heard anybody that used to be an addict, that has been recovered for many years, you'll hear a lot of them say that they still have the guilt, they still have the shame, and you could relapse at any moment if you let your mind go there. But just like with drugs and alcohol, there's a lot of shame and guilt when it comes to the self-harm. There's a lot of hiding, there's a lot of suppressed feelings, there's a lot of, you can't speak. So just like for me I think that's why I chose self-harm, because just like with any addiction, you can't say what's wrong. You physically cannot say what's wrong. You can't say I'm anxious, I'm depressed, I'm hurt, and then you can't follow that up with why. You just go to the food, you don't eat, or you binge and purge, or you self-harm, or you drink, or you get high, or it's whatever people decide to do as far as an addiction goes. And for some people, it's beyond that. It doesn't just have to be that, But by the time I was, 9 years old, I had gotten into it with my father, because by that time we were spending a lot of time together, and it wasn't in a good way. It really threw me for a loop when it came to my family, because it's like a lot of them knew what was going on, but they were just like had their back turned, or a lot of them said that, I deserved what I got. A lot of them said that, I was just next in line. And to be that sickening and to be that horrible to a child, a disabled child at that. And a lot of people don't realize that disabled children, whether boys or girls, it doesn't matter who gets the short end of the stick. I know people want to pinpoint that boys have it worse or girls have it worse. I'm not into any of that crap. But disabled kids in general are 50 times more likely to be abused by their own family or individuals in their family that they know of, because we're seen as we're weak, we're nothing, and we're not going to tell either. Like that's the main thing, that people want power over you. They want to control. They want that control aspect. It's not even power anymore. It's just people have over control issues, and they need to sustain that by hurting somebody else, especially someone that they, in their eyes, are weaker than you. And it's not always the case. And unfortunately, the more disabled the child is, the more they're going to take advantage. And the thing of it is that we didn't know what I had. That was the scary part, is that we didn't know what I had, but my father took the risk anyways. My father did not care. He was just soulless. He just did not care. And a lot of it was, he had gone through the same abuse I did. My grandmother had gone through the same abuse I did, and to them it was like, well, it's your turn. And And this isn't just in America either. Like a lot of people think that this is like a new thing for some. I don't know if it's just like the blind eye, the ignorance, you know, choosing to not see it or whatever. But in other countries, this is accepted. In other countries, this is okay. But nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody cares, right? Oh, that's another country. I don't care. But then when it happens in America, oh, that doesn't happen. It's like, it's so aggravating. Um, and the thing of it is too is that a lot of there's like a lot of animosity among the family because you're supposed to turn a blind eye. Like I don't know how many countless families and stories that I've heard on, you know, all social media platforms, you know, even in person when I was doing the brand. I couldn't count how many stories where, oh well, the our uncle or whoever was a pedophile. Oh, he was, but they wouldn't use the P word, right? Because you weren't allowed to say that in the family. Oh, he was just a molester and you just weren't allowed to be around him. And you weren't allowed to put your kids around him. Like, what the fuck is that about? Like that just irritated me even more. It's like, why would you allow that in your family though? Like, why is enabling that kind of horrible situation to put your own kids in and then having to grow up and then making like purposely triggering the like you're like that's horrible, you know what I'm saying? And then you have to face them and pretend like nothing ever. That's bullshit. I'm sorry, but that's just bullshit. But a lot of families do this. A lot of families do this, and I don't care what background you come from, a lot of people do this. But I also think that, you know, a lot of I was supposed to be sympathetic towards the family members who abused me or who allowed it or who whatever, right? I was supposed to get over it in a sense. That's what people say nowadays, right? You're supposed to get over it. You're supposed to. I was a kid, you know, I was a child. And even as a child, I wasn't willing to put up with it. Like it was a lot of by the time I had to be sex trafficked, it was no longer sexual abuse. It was no longer sexual assault. It was just plain torture. It was torture. If you've ever heard stories about satanic ritual abuse, if you've ever heard stories that has to do with that realm of society, then you have absolutely you have a clue as to what the hell I'm talking about. You have absolutely every clue as to what I'm talking about, as to how bad it got. I shouldn't have even survived. I was amazed at through every, you know, torture, every assault, every brutalization that I went through, that I made it out alive. There were some days where I had to crawl back, literally. That's how bad it got. I had to clean myself up because they didn't care. And a lot of the times I just made peace with God. You know, during the torture, I would just make peace with God and just say to myself, you know, okay, if you want me to go, I'm ready to go, because I mean, I don't know how much more I can take, you know? And I didn't understand why I stayed alive for so long through that. Like I didn't understand the torture with that. And growing up Catholic, you're taught everything is a punishment. That's what you're taught as a Catholic. Everything is a punishment. You're supposed to enable these pedophiles because I know that that's like a taboo. You're not supposed to say that about the Catholic Church. And again, not all Catholics, not all of them are pedophiles. Not all of them are enablers, but the majority are. It's what I had to go through. They were. the Catholic school that I went to. Like, they fucking were. And, you know, getting into it, I had just turned 9. And getting into it with him and getting into an argument, he was pissed off because he's like, you need to stop hurting yourself. I said, well, you need to stop doing, I said, you stop doing what you're doing, and then maybe I'll stop. So for me, it was not only a way for me to escape, it was my act of rebellion. It was my act of, this is what the fuck you're doing to me, and I don't care what happens to me after this. And he's like, well, if you don't stop, you're going to die. And I said, don't you think that I would have done that already with what you're doing? With you and your friends and you and your clients, or whatever the hell you want to call that? Don't you think that you're going to eventually kill me too? Either way, it's a Russian roulette. So what difference does it make if I'm still hurting myself? Like, to me, it did not matter. And he's like, you have to stop. And then it got to the point where he would punish me. And like, they would punish me even more during the torture, thinking that that's going to scare me out of self-harm, when in fact it backfired. It made it worse because it gave me more ideas as to how to hide it. It gave me more ideas as to torture myself even more. Like, it was just so messed up. And, you know, it eventually he had to back off because the eating disorder got so bad. And I can get into that further in another video, but the eating disorder had gotten so bad that I almost got cancer. I've talked about this a lot. Like, I literally had stage 0 cancer, where they had to like remove the polyps. They said that if you don't, because the doctors didn't know anything. Like, I couldn't tell the doctors anything. Like, to me, it was like, if my own family didn't give a shit, why were the doctors? Like, that's kind of how I felt about adults in general. Like, if I'm telling my own family that I'm being tortured and being brutalized, nobody gave a shit, why would another authority give a crap? You guys would be surprised. Me being sex trafficked as a child, as a disabled child, you would be surprised. Lawyers, police officers, medical doctors, married men, you would be surprised at how many professions of men buy kids. You would be surprised. A lot of you guys would literally fall off of your chair. A lot of you guys would be so repulsed that you would want to throw up in your mouth. That's how bad it is. And I know that people act like, oh, well, this doesn't happen. But like, I don't give a shit how bad of a blind eye you want to turn. It's not going to happen on my channel. It's not going to happen. You're not going to get that on my channel. And a lot of people, a lot of the times, a lot of people can't deal with what I say because it's too real and it's too much and blah, blah, blah. But I've been saying this for years, whether through social media platforms, whether it was, you know, meeting me in person with the brand and me doing my support groups, me doing my public speeches. This needs to be discussed, because ignoring it is what's manifesting, you know, the enablation of adults to keep torturing kids, the enablation. And then we're criticizing kids who become adults, who end up becoming quote unquote monsters, because we're considered monsters because we not only want to hurt ourselves, but there are actual other kids who hurt other people. Why? Because they were tortured as kids, whether it was through their parents, whether it was through anybody else in the family, and then we're supposed to turn a blind eye. Enough is enough. That's basically what adults who snap and lose their shit and start hurting other people, or eventually turn it on themselves, and they end their own lives. I'll give you guys an example, okay? This is rising. So it's not just, you know, it's not just, people think that it's, you know, it's just one thing. It's skyrocketing as far as the suicides, as far as the self-harm, as far as the eating disorders when it comes to teenagers, okay? It's number 2 in America as far as self-inflicting wounds, as far as addiction, as far as it's number 2 in America for teenagers. And it's not just, you know, social media. People want to pinpoint, oh, it's just social, it's social media. Then take yourself off of the platform. Take yourself off of the computer, close your computer. People, like adults want to make jokes. And for me, the adults that make jokes about this, that kids that lose their lives through this kind of pain, the adults that make fun of the kids are the exact adults that are the ones that would be proven to torture kids. Because I have seen so many kids do this online. They will showcase this online, unfortunately. It's like a thing now. And this started back, I want to say back in 2012, 2010, 2012 is when kids would do this online and showcase this online, and they would take their own lives. 2010 and 2012 is when it skyrocketed as to kids doing this. This is not okay. This is not okay. And then we want to, you know, blame a lot of the times kids who, it's half and half. You know, you've got social media, you've got abuse happening in the home, you've got, you know, kids being preyed upon, kids being kidnapped, kids being tortured, kids, there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of manifestation. And everybody wants to blame one thing at a time. It's not. It's not. So if you guys get upset and you guys want to pinpoint other things, or you just, you know, want to argue, you're gonna have to argue with yourselves, because that's not what I'm for. That's not why I'm doing this, okay? The thing of it is too, is that I started noticing the skyrocket back in 2010. Started noticing people, at the time I wasn't doing the support groups. At the time I was just, you know, doing my public speaking, and a lot of kids would come up to me afterwards, and, you know, after your public speeches, you're able to do that. You're able to speak with the your audience. You're just able to do that. And a lot of them came up to me and said, how did you do this? How did you get better? How did you get to the point where you have so much insight? How did you find a way to not hurt yourself? How did you find a way to not deal with everything that's being thrown at us right now, as far as eating disorders, as far as body dysmorphia, like so on and so forth? And this was before the time of, you know, like social media had just begun. It's not how it is now. It's bad now when it comes to torturing kids and their mental state. And I just felt like I needed to help people more so, especially back then, you know, into now. But I think for me, the self-harm got even more, it got even worse after my father passed away, because, and I don't recommend you guys watching this, I mean, especially if you're someone who has gone through a sexual assault, I don't recommend anybody watching it. But the documentary, with my own stupidity, I needed to do research, and I watched the Finding Neverland documentary with Michael Jackson. And I wasn't going to pick a side. You know, I'm not interested in the, oh, well, he did it, he didn't do it, he did it, he didn't do it. Oh, you're siding with the, you're automatically biased because you were abused. I'm not into any of that bullcrap. It's all a distraction. So whether they lied or didn't lie, that's not why I did the fucking research. A lot of that was extremely triggering, but at the same time, if you were someone who has gone through sex trafficking, if you were someone who had a father who was a pedophile, if you were someone who had gone through incest, and it was more so a victim of incest, because a lot of people just think that, you know, if your family is into incest and you enjoy it, that's bullshit. But what they said was true. When your predator dies, you die with them. It's like you lose your identity, because you guys need to remember that from the ages of 6 years old, because that's when the grooming started with my father. It started off slow. So from the ages of 6 until he passed away when I was 15, it's a lot of years. That's all I saw myself as. I didn't understand. I was trying to survive through it with the cutting, with the eating disorder, with, you know, getting high and drinking. And that's all I saw myself as. To a lot of men, I was this sex doll, sex toy, whatever you guys want to call it. But to myself, I was nothing. I was absolutely nothing. And if you think about it, it's true. To my own father, I was nothing. I was supposed to be his child, his flesh and blood, and I was nothing. Let's be real here. So when he died, I didn't know what to do with myself. It's like I was given a chance to breathe. I was given a chance to find myself again and to figure out who I was and to redefine that identity. And that's scary. It truly is scary. So the self-harm got extremely bad. And it got even worse well into my 20s and mid 20s, because that was when the treatment started. And I remember my therapist, he was my therapist for several years, at the residential and at the group home. I remember him saying that you have so much trauma that it's going to take years for you to sort everything out. It's really going to take a lot of, it's not going to take a whole couple of weeks. It's not going to take it's going to take years for you to unravel everything. He's like, think of it this way. All of your addictions, think of them as all different categories. So all different books. So your addictions are all one book. These are little books. Those are your addictions. There's a category underneath your addictions as to what causes it. There's going to be multitudes of reasons as to what causes each, each addiction. So the self-harm may have 1 or 3 or more. Your eating disorder, 1 or 3 or more. Your lashing out, 1 or 3 or more. Your depression, 1 or 3 or more. Your, drugs, like so on and so forth. So he thought of it as, think of yourself like a bookshelf. Think of your brain like a bookshelf. And we're going to have to go through it one at a time. So you take out, right now we're going to talk about the sexual trauma. So you take out that book. open it up, go through a couple of pages, close it back up, put it back up. Next week, we talk about something else. It literally took a lot of years to unravel everything. And then it took 15 years for me to forgive my father. It took a lot of years after he died to forgive him. I couldn't forgive him when he died. When he was dying, he wanted me to, he literally said, I need you to forgive me. As like he was literally on his way in the afterlife. Okay. He was literally on his way. He said, I need you to forgive me before I go. I said, I can't do that. I can't do it right now. You want me to, you're putting me on the, you're doing that on purpose. You're putting me on the spot. I'm 15 years old. You haven't even finished. Like you didn't even stop like I asked you to. You didn't stop like I asked you to. You kept going. I said, you're an animal and you're an asshole, but you want me to forgive you right now on the spot. And it was in front of all of my family, by the way. He had his siblings who had no idea what the hell we were talking about because, you know, he's like an angel in their eyes. And I rolled my eyes at that point. And they kept pushing after he had passed away. They kept pushing. What was he talking about? Like, when you leave me the fuck alone, my father just died. You please leave me alone. And then I literally, my mom came home and she was like, what's going on? I'm like, can you please tell your mother to back the fuck off? Like, he just died. Like, what is wrong with her? Like, she either needs a life or she needs to get, like, something needs to happen because she's getting on my nerves. And I literally had to go, like, outside to breathe. Like, I just couldn't deal with it. But I couldn't forgive him. I just couldn't. And I felt like he did it on purpose. He said it out loud on purpose so that I could give him what he wanted one final time. And, you know, like his siblings were there. His siblings were there. So they came from Mexico. They didn't know what was going on. Like nobody, a lot of people didn't know. Like a lot of the family members didn't know, but the ones that did know turned a blind eye. They were like, it was no big deal. So I just felt like he did it on purpose. And I couldn't do it. And I just felt like it was wrong of him to ask me. You know, it was really, really wrong of him to ask me to do that. And I couldn't. So, you know, it just took me a long time. So, I want to say, like, I'm going to go back to my teens. I remember specifically, I was dating. I didn't want to, but I felt like I was being pressured because a lot of my friends, I'm putting that in quotes because let's be real, there's no real friends in high school, you know, unless you're lucky and you get people that, you know, actually care about you, but it's, you can count on your hands how many people actually care about you in life. But I felt like I couldn't hide it. You know, by the time I was in my late teens, I just couldn't hide it. I was in high school and I was dating and I didn't want to, but I felt like I was pressured because I was the odd man out. A lot of my friends at the time didn't know that I was so brutally abused sexually that I just was afraid of men. I just I just refused to trust men. And I was dating women secretly because to me, it just felt better. Like to me, like I could, like, it was just easier on my part to deal with the woman and not have to be tortured and annoyed. And you know, when you're a teenager, guys are just like women complain about men like their husbands or their boyfriends. Women complain about men, you know, I want to have sex, I'm horny, blah blah, like they're just nagging the fuck out of you. that they want to have sex, right? And boys and their genes are way, way worse. They're way worse. You know, it's the I love you, and that's just their way of saying I love you so that they, you know, they can get what they want, get their way. And I remember specifically, like, when I would cut myself, they would bitch about that, right? They would complain about that and say, you need to stop doing that. And they quickly realized that they couldn't control me. They couldn't control that part of me. If you were going to be with me, you had to accept that I was going to do what the fuck I was going to do to try to survive. And a lot of the guys that I dated were pissed off because I wasn't like crying over them once we broke up. But it's like, you didn't give a shit to begin with, so why would I cry about, like, I'm dealing with enough as it is. And then a lot of them would get upset to this day because, well, I didn't know you were going through that. Well, you didn't give a shit at the time, so why would I tell you then? So you know now. So what is the like, what is the problem? But it got to the point where they would break up with me because they would be like, oh, I can't handle them. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I really don't know what to tell you. And it would be to the point where I would have like 300 cuts all over my body. Didn't matter. Unfortunately, it did not matter where. Like, it was that bad when I was a teenager. I lost control. And it got a little easier and a little better in my 20s. And I did have 3 years of basically sobriety. You know, I wasn't starving myself. I wasn't, so from 2011 until 2013, so like mid to, you know, early, late 20s. And I had gone through, you know, no smoking cigarettes, no drinking, no drugs, no self-harm, no eating disorder behaviors whatsoever. Like, I was completely clean and sober through everything. And at the time I was dating my girlfriend who was transsexual, and I feel like I fell apart when she died, when she, you know, took her own. I fell apart. And that's when, you know, it got bad again. And I just couldn't deal with it. And at the time I was in residential. I had just, like, it would have been a year of being in residential. And I don't know, I couldn't deal with it. And it was just like another person that I cared about died, another person that I truly loved died, and I just couldn't do it. And like the relapse happened a lot with, you know, everything. It's just like it wasn't just a self-harm, it was everything. And I would emotionally self-harm by calling people that, you know, I knew weren't beneficial, that I knew were horrible to me, that I knew that wouldn't give me the time of day, or just tell me what a piece of shit person I am. And to me, that just made it even worse. And it was just like my excuse to hurt myself even more. And it was just like a never ending cycle. So in the 10 years of recovery, what was for me, what was the, you know, turning point in 2011? Because, you know, that was 10 years ago. And the thing of it is that it was a lot of reasons as to why I had to stop. So I had cut my arm, and it was like it was this arm, and it was a pretty deep cut. I'm not going to say what I used, and I ended up in the ER. A lot of the times I would end up in the ER not realizing that it was the Ehlers-Danlos that was trying to tell me, you know, you got to stop doing this. This is dangerous. And I hit an artery, unfortunately, and I wasn't able to move my arm, and it scared the crap out of my caseworker. And the doctor's like, you got to stop doing this, because one of these days you're going to lose a limb. Like literally, you're going to lose your ability to move something. Because, okay, so for the average person, when they self-harm, or when they get a cut, like it doesn't even have, it can just be like an accidental cut, right? So for the average person, it takes anywhere between 2 to 3 weeks for the skin to go back and heal. So when your skin breaks, it literally, it goes like this, right, on your skin. And it takes a long time for it to close back up, and then for the new skin to come in and replenish itself. But at the same time, that area of your skin isn't no longer the same, because you have scar tissue that develops in there because it was a cut or whatever, you know, whatever wound happened. And for someone with Ehlers-Danlos, there is no scar tissue, because one, if we get a cut, our blood doesn't clot. So it's even more dangerous because the skin is thinning. So there is no time to do this. There is no time to, like time doesn't exist when it comes to our skin, because it's translucent, meaning it's thinning. So eventually there's no layers. So that's why it's so dangerous. So if I'm self-harming, having Ehlers-Danlos, I'm gonna, 50 to 100 times more likely hit a vein or an artery more susceptible and more easily than the average person, because there's no skin left. So I wasn't able to move my arm for like several hours. So it kind of freaked out the caseworker, and the doctor said that the doctor was trying to calm the caseworker down because she was just like panicking. And the doctor's like, she's going to be fine. It's just consider it an injury. Every time she's in pain, every time her knee hurts, every time her ankle hurts, every time, just consider it. And it's like an injury. It has to heal. And there's no amount of pain pills. There's no amount of anything that she can give herself. She has to let and allow her body to heal. So that was just like my warning. And within the 10 years, and I know that a lot of people think that recovery is like a straightforward, path, and there's no bumps in the road, there's no relapses, there's none of that. For me, I look at things a little different, because I know a lot of people take that mantra of AA and NA throughout everything they do. Like, doesn't matter what addiction, a lot of people take that mantra. And that never worked for me. So AA and NA and all of that stuff didn't work for me, because to me, it was more about sponsors that had been in that field for so long, that wanted power. They want control over you. Like, it's just like it's just a lot of darkness in that nonprofit that I just don't want to get into. But if that works for you, fine. But for me, that's not something that works. And I think it's because I have, I have more issues. I just have way more issues. Sorry. I just have way, 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 way more issues than just drugs and alcohol. Like a lot of people just have one thing and I have multiple. And the majority of people that have complex PTSD have that. You know what I'm saying? The one thing isn't going to work. What was I saying? So that was the start of it. That was just like, okay, I gotta, get better. And then I spoke with, I still kept in contact with her, with, people that worked for her or her family or, so on and so forth, because she came from a wealthy family. And in 2012, I took a trip. I didn't realize that she left a trip for me. Before she died, she wanted me to go on this trip. And I mean, she just thought of everything. And I went with my friend who passed away. He passed away not too long after. He had cystic fibrosis. And I just felt like him taking the trip would be better. It was the works. It was, a private jet, having our own assistant with us throughout the traveling, having our own car, having our own hotel picked out, being in London, being in Germany, being in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, for those of you who don't know where that actually is. But everything was thought out. The dinners, the hotels, the places we stayed at, the events we went to, the sightings. I saw everything. And it would be nice to go back nowadays, but there's no way I can travel. I can't be, because of the Ehlers-Danlos and because of my aorta, because of, my capacity with my breathing and stuff like that. There's no way that I can be in an airplane. There's no way. So if you guys ever want places to go, Amsterdam is such an amazing place. They have such gorgeous sightings, and it's such a beautiful place. So if you guys ever get a chance to go to Amsterdam, go. London is pretty cool too. They've got a lot of cool spots there. And I went to Berlin, Germany, also beautiful spot. So if you guys, ever want to travel to Europe and you guys have the funds and you guys, are able to travel, just do it, But, it was just, that also helps that, I kept in contact with, her family and her friends and her, people that worked, in the mansions and stuff. But that was just hard, it's just hard having to be reminded of her and stuff like that, and knowing that there was nothing I could do. There was nothing I could do to help her. And I just needed to find ways to replace everything that, that had made me feel good, that, was truly dangerous for me. And the last self-harm incident that happened, and even my like therapist at the time and my like my doctor and all of that, even they were like, this isn't because of your self-harm, this was because you were, high and drunk. But the last thing I remember is self-harming, and then I woke up in the ER. Like that was my lapse. And I just felt like um I could have not woken up, had it not been for a friend of mine who I spoke to the night of, and did a what is it called? What is it called when people call the police to have a check? What is it called? Like a wellness check. That's what it's called. She knew she knew my address, and she didn't hear from me, and she knew that I was pretty out of it, and I wasn't speaking in a good. I was in a dark place, and I wasn't speaking in a good sense, and yeah, they I woke up in basically a pool of my own blood, and I could have died that night, and that was 2014, so that was my last lapse when it came to self-harm. And for those of you who don't realize, a relapse is when you go back to the addiction and then you don't stop. Like you just continue on. Like it's like you picked up where you left off, so to speak. And a lapse it was just a one-time thing. And it was just like a one-time fleeting moment. And then you just pick yourself back up. And then you, like hours later, you're just, okay, I messed up. I got to get myself back on track and just keep going from there. So that's the difference between a relapse and a lapse for those of you who are trying to figure that out. But I just, that was just like, that could have been the end of me. And I went in the treatment, and I just, for me, that was just like, okay, that can't be an option anymore, And for a lot of people, especially lately, like a lot of people that I've met over the years, will say that, especially like within the last 3 years, they hear that, I'm always in pain. They hear that, the Ehlers-Danlos is pretty bad. They hear that, I don't have any energy. So a lot of people just say, the go-to now is, oh, well, just, can you do euthanasia? Where it's like on medical suicide or whatever. And it's like, it's not suicide if it's murder. People need to remember that that's illegal in America. It's illegal. And for those of you who say that it's not, and it's the answer for cancer patients, that's all fine and dandy, but I'm not a cancer patient. That might have worked for people that you guys have known that have cancer. I'm not a cancer patient. And to suggest that to someone who has been fighting for many years of their life, you might as well just tell me to go kill myself. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know that for a lot of people, they don't mean to intend that, but you don't have to insult me at the same time. Like, I'm not dumb, but that's the ultimate insult to someone who fights terminal illness and a fatal illness that's nothing like cancer. A lot of people think that mine is minimal. Oh, it's not a big deal. You don't have cancer, so you don't know what that's like. Dude, stop it. A lot of people, like, I always, throw it back at people when they say that, it's not as bad as you think it is. You guys wouldn't last a second. For those of you who want to judge, you guys wouldn't last a second in my shoes. Losing your vision, losing your hearing, your energy being drained constantly. You can't do the simple things that you used to do. Having to use the wheelchair to preserve your energy. Not being able to go outside and not wear protective, you know, gear like sunglasses and hats, and seeing nothing but blurry shadows when you go outside. Doesn't matter if it's sunny out, doesn't matter if it's gloomy out. Like, a lot of you guys that want to judge other people wouldn't last a second in another person's shoes that deals with a lot. Like, let's be real here. But, and I know that a lot of people think that, you know, that it's, if you have recovered for 10 years from something, or, you know, 10 years or longer, or even 5 years or longer, that, you know, that you're cured, right? It's kids, you know, it went away, you're cured, blah, blah, blah. Just because I use the word recover doesn't mean that it goes away. It's always in the back of your mind. Demons are never going to go away. We live in a spiritual world, and we are not of this world. So just because I don't relapse and I haven't done anything as far as all of my addictions go, doesn't mean that I don't get depressed. It doesn't mean that I don't get anxious. It just means that I utilize different things to manage everything that's going on in my head. And it never goes away. It's once an addict, always an addict. It doesn't matter what, it really truly doesn't matter what you're dealing with and what you're trying to fight off as far as demons go. But it never goes away. And just because, you know, it's in the back of my mind, it doesn't mean that I play around with it. I don't entertain it. I don't give it a fleeting thought, because I don't want to waste any more time. I feel like throughout the years, I've wasted so much time being angry. I wasted so much time not forgiving. I wasted so much time not enjoying what life I had left. Even knowing, you know, that I had the Ehlers-Danlos, even knowing that eventually this was going to take a toll on me, you know. I have lost a lot of friends with the type of Ehlers-Danlos that I have. I lost them at a very young age, and they did exactly what I did. You know, they took care of their health. They ate what they were supposed to eat. They made sure that they didn't cause more inflammation in their body. They just did everything right, and they still died young. So the fact that I outlived, you know, 3 of my friends that have the exact same illness, but, you know, everyone's different. Not every, you know, illness is the same. Not every diagnosis is the same. So I think people need to remember that also. So I think people also need to remember too, is that what works for me isn't going to work for someone else. So if you know someone who's struggling with, you know, self-harm and ED and so on and so forth, like for several reasons, some people may not know what they need. Some people may not know all their triggers. Some people may not feel like therapy is going to help. It truly just depends on the individual. And then there are some individuals that choose to stay sick, that don't want to get better, that just feel like it's just easier to live life in pain, unfortunately. And I know a lot of people that do that, you know, they just prefer their illness. They prefer, it's like their security blanket or their friend, or, you know, so like just those kinds of scenarios that like I've heard so many people say different things. when it comes to, you know, not getting better. But I am pretty proud of myself for, you know, doing being able to manage for 10 years of, you know, not relapsing, knowing that, you know, losing my vision and hearing, knowing that I, you know, don't have that much time left. I don't even know. But there is no guarantee either, because, you know, the doctor said 3 years ago this month that I needed to get my shit in order and things are going to get worse from here on out, and we don't know how much time you have left and we can't give you a timeline. And you really need to figure out what you need to do. And that actually pivoted and motivated me to forgive my father. This 2018 was when I found out the news, and then, you know, I stopped responding to treatments, and I needed to do this on my own. You know, there's really no point in going to doctors. There's really no point in doing all of those things. And, you know, does going through heart failure scare me? Yes. Does stopping breathing scare me? Yes. Is a side effect of dying depression? Yes. But at the same time, it's like, I know that I have to follow, you know, God's path. And if that's something you don't believe in, that's okay. You know, I'm not forcing you. I'm just telling you what my thoughts are. I'm still here for a reason, and he needing me to do more things. So that's where I'm at. And I, you know, plan to do more of these in the future, as far as like all of the other addictions. So I hope that this helped you guys. I hope that, you know, this gives you a sense of a different perspective, because I know that there's a lot of blame when it comes to, you know, kids and addiction, and you know, adults who grew up in abusive homes and addiction and trauma. And there's a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of ignorance. You know, there's more so ignorance than anything. There's a lot of, you know, turning the blind eye and acting like, you know, we just need to blame everybody, but in reality, we just need to sit and think, you know. And just going through the comments here. I think that's you know, pretty much all I can say. As far as, you know, recovering from self-abuse. And I know a lot of people that messaged me and emailed me saying that was I one of the individuals that went through SAFE. SAFE is it was a unit. So just like the eating disorder had a unit, SelfHarm actually had a unit back then. And the reason that people were asking me that is because it was short-lived. Like, it didn't last long at all, as far as that unit goes. And I think that there's a lot of controversy when it comes to seeking help when it comes to that, because, I mean, again, there's a lot of sneaking around. There's a lot of manipulation. There's a lot of there's more than one way to hurt yourself, unfortunately, when it comes to self-abuse. And I can understand from a medical standpoint and a hospital standpoint as to why they couldn't keep that unit in there for long. And a lot of things happen that would cause a unit to shut down like that. But no, I wasn't. I knew about the unit. I knew about. I knew of other people who went through that who did not recover. They didn't. They did not recover right after that. But again, depending on the addiction, it takes at least. I want to say that the average, it really just depends on the addiction, and it depends on the hold that it has on you, and it also depends on the individual who doesn't want to let it go. Also, but I would say 10 to 12 tries. So if you know somebody that was addicted to something and they've gone to treatments and they've gone to rehab for like 10 to 12 times, that's the average until someone actually decides to get better. So yeah, again, everyone's different. Not everyone's going to look at recovery the same. Not everyone's going to heal the same. And I think people just need to remember that as well, that what fits for one person isn't going to work for another person. It's not, nothing is one size fits all. And I think that people need to break away from that concept when it comes to both mental and medical help, depending on your situation. But there is no such thing as one size fits all. I know that that was taught to us in school and that was taught to us as a society, but that's not the case, But another question that people gave me in the emails and the messages is that do you think that individuals who self-harm especially back then, so I'm assuming my generation, do you think that the individuals who self-harmed back then were the catalyst as to what is going on at the moment? So I think a lot of people think that my generation started all of this. Like, we started the eating disorder epidemic. We started self-harm. We started suicide. I don't know where that comes from. I don't know why everything always has to pinpoint to generational wars. I don't know who the hell started that. But just because it was new to you as an individual, so like, let's say you are Gen X and or baby boomer. So like, let's say you're Gen X and you are a baby boomer, or you are a silent generation. Just because you didn't see it in front of you doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Same goes for trauma, same goes for abuse, same goes for pedophilia, just because it was not in front of you and you didn't see it for yourself does not mean it doesn't exist. And I know a lot of people have a hard time with that, especially parents. A lot of people have a hard time with that concept that it never happened because I didn't see it. No, it did exist. I mean, it maybe not, around you, but it happens in neighborhoods. It doesn't matter what background you come from. It doesn't matter what walk of life you've lived. It happens. Okay. I do feel like a lot of individuals from my generation were misunderstood. You know, I can't count on my hands how many suicides I've known about, how many murders I've known about in my lifetime when it comes to my generation. And a lot of it stemmed from abuse at home. You know, that's a lot of it where it stems from. And the sad thing is that I mean, that was another thing that was hard for me to recover as well, is that a lot of people that I cared about and loved had to pass away and weren't allowed to get a glimpse of what their life would have been like had they you know, were either given themselves a chance or were given a chance. And I had to keep going. But another thing too is that people remind me, a lot of my, you know, friends remind me, is that, you know, you're gonna see a lot of those people when you pass on anyways. Like they're kind of like your guardian angels, and they come to you before you die. And I do believe in that as well, because it happened when my dad passed. When my dad passed, he saw people that have died before him. And that's kind of like a thing that happens when you pass away. And it's not just, you know, for religious people. You know, a lot of people think that that's a religious thing. And I hate to use this example, but when George Floyd was being suffocated and being, you know, murdered, he called out for his mom, and his mom had already died. And it's usually because you're seeing them right in front of you. And to me, that I cried when he said that, because it meant that he was going. That's what that meant. He was going to the afterlife. That's what that meant. And I couldn't stop crying, because that's horrible. You know, no individual should have to die like that. I don't care. I don't care what they are. I don't care if they were on the streets. I don't care if they were a gang member. I don't care if they were a drug addict. I don't care. Everybody has a purpose in life. I don't care. You guys get mad at that all you want, but that's just cold, you know? I mean, it's just like the most horrible thing that you can do to anybody, just because you feel like you have power, you're in control, or whatever delusion you got in your head. But I think I think that'll be it. I gotta eat something. Getting kind of hungry. And I gotta turn the heat on, because the husband is freezing, I can imagine. That's why I have my long sleeve on. But I will let you guys go, and I will catch up with you guys in the comments. You know, I just will catch up with everybody that, you know, commented, and make sure everyone's, you know, doing okay. I'm doing a deeper dive video for, you know, the comparisons between Astro World and all of the other artists that have gone through quote unquote sacrifices. And then, you know, you've got the comparison between Woodstock and Coachella. So I'm going to be doing like a deeper dive type of video, and that's going to take some time, because I'm not only still doing research, but you know, you guys are going to have to be patient with me on that one. And a bunch of other videos are coming as well. No, not just, you know, lives, but actual on-demand videos. And I know it's been a while since I've, you know, been on the camera and, you know, done an on-demand. So just, you know, be on the lookout for that. And I will catch you guys in the next one. And hopefully you guys are doing well. And take care of yourselves, okay? All right. Love you guys. Bye.